One's the charming, if sloppy swan song of Ray Harryhausen. The other is a stunning, if generic action flick that happens to have some Greek influences. Clash of the Titans. They remade it. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
How we doing today, Jake? And, the audience, I guess, but the audience can't respond, so just Jake.
Well, they can't respond. Well, it's okay here. There's a lot of ice out right now. It's been icing for the majority of the day, actually.
Yeah, it's same here. I've had to de-ice my car 3 times today, and
Good Lord.
First time it took about 30 minutes.
That's ridiculous. They said that a second system is coming this weekend, and that it's for the Midwest at least, and it's supposed to be one of the biggest this year, apparently. And I was like, we got a pretty big one about a month back. I don't know how it could be any larger than that. What was that, like 10 inches or something?
Yeah. That's fun. It's not this weekend, is it? I gotta drive this weekend.
They said Saturday into Sunday, apparently. That's what I heard.
Ah, fuck. Well. I'll see how that one goes.
Yep, we're on the same page there. Yeah. So, what have you been watching this week? Trapped inside.
Yeah.
These past few weeks. We always say this past week, but this is not. As of now, this is not a weekly thing. So.
Yeah, no, it never has been. It's not. It's easier just with week. Just the several weeks. It's like, nah.
Yeah. All right. We'll keep saying it then. Just pretend it's a weekly show.
Yeah, exactly. We have different weeks.
This was recorded last July.
Yeah. We're predicting the future now.
Yeah.
At least with the weather. But I don't know if I've watched anything for the last 2 weeks, but for the first week I had a whole bunch of stuff. I rewatched Indiana Jones. I think I went to
the first one?
Yeah, the first one.
Yeah, okay.
Went to go see Lego Movie 2 with the girlfriend.
Oh, how was that?
It was awesome. I think the first one was better, obviously, but
was that a joke intended from the movie?
No, it was not. You hack.
Okay.
But yeah, not bad choice of words. But yeah, it was really good. The first one's still better, obviously, but I just love Legos in general, so.
Okay, that's
still
good.
Nice.
I saw the Playmobil movies being worked on.
What? Is Playmobil still a thing?
I guess so. I mean, it's primarily Danish, but isn't Lego primarily like from one of those European countries? Germany or something?
I don't know. I thought Lego. I think Lego might be German, but
yeah, I just saw an article about it. Like, Playmobil movie is currently in development, so apparently it's not even like being passed around. Apparently they're actually making it. So,
I mean, like, all right.
We'll see how that goes. I guess.
Filmmakers do what filmmakers want to do, I guess.
Yeah. So, anything else?
Started watching iZombie, the series on Netflix, but other than that, that's about it, I think.
Huh,
I know the Oscars happened recently, but I did not watch them at all. This year just did not interest me that much with it.
I'm not gonna lie, I did watch for, I'd say, the last 2/3 of it. I missed the first part, but I did see a big chunk of the show, actually.
Right.
Despite having seen, I think, 4 of the 8 movies, only half of the movies that were up for Best Picture. So,
yeah, I keep reading that so many movies are up for Best Picture nowadays. It used to just be like 5.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 4 to 5, and then in like 2011 or 2012 they upped it, I think. I don't know why. I mean, there's plenty of good movies, but if you're picking you can just cut it off at a point.
Yeah, like the fact that a Marvel movie is up for grabs for a Best Picture, that's when you know you have too many. Like, I know Black Panther was good, but it's a Marvel movie. It's not, like, no.
Oh, okay, so Are you
Okay.
done with your section? I don't want to step
Oh
on
yeah,
your.
no, I'm done.
Okay, so um, I think I have discussed on this show before that I've seen like 3 of the Marvel movies in that universe because it's never really drew me in, whatever.
Drawn.
It has never drawn me in, I would say.
Yeah.
Just not interesting, and eventually just got too complex for me. So,
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, that'll happen. There's so many movies, and I didn't even really care much for the first Avengers, so I just stopped. Uh, but since it was up, I did watch Black Panther. Um, I I thought it was pretty all right. I wouldn't say that it was like spectacular story wise. I see what it was doing culturally.
Yeah,
I
and it's
guess.
cool just for if only that aspect.
Yeah, and I mean the design of everything is not like the design of Wakanda, the set, uh, the environment of everything. Um, whenever God, what is his? Whenever T'Challa
Oh,
goes
Chadwick
in,
Boseman or something.
yeah, that's the actor.
Yeah.
But whenever T'Challa goes into that like dreamscape or whatever, and interacts with his dead father, that's like really beautiful. That
Oh
landscape, and
yeah.
there's like dark purple and blue colors everywhere. Like that, those are like the best parts of the movie to me because they look the most interesting. I liked watching them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's about it for that. Uh,
And hey, like for design wise, it's the movie that got Marvel its first Oscar this year with costume design.
oh, you're right. I mean, I didn't know that you were right about it being their first Oscar, but I forgot that it won.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
First time they've. I don't think it's the first time they've been nominated for an Oscar, but it's the first time they've actually gotten one. So.
Right, definitely. I mean, Avengers was nominated for an Oscar too.
Yeah.
I'll talk about that.
Yeah.
In a sec. I watched Hotel Transylvania 3. Uh,
Why?
Summer vacation. Okay, let me explain myself really quickly.
All right.
I'm not gonna say, well, my cousins were watching it and it just happened to be on. No, I actively went and watched it myself.
Oh God.
But I have a good reason.
Okay.
So the movie was standard. It's an inoffensive kids movie. It was okay in parts, but for the most part, it was just really annoying. It's just a really
Obviously.
annoying film, and that's how the other 2 were. But I I can't help it. It is the character designs and the animation, the way the animation flows. It is mesmerizing what Gendy Tartakovsky is able to do. You know,
Yeah, fair enough.
yeah, I've been watching. I mean, I've been watching his stuff since Dexter,
Oh yeah.
but I don't. Everything that he does is great, including this. What is it? Dexter, Samurai Jack, Symbiotic Titan. Even though that thing wasn't able to take off, it still looks really good.
Oh yeah.
If they make a 4th one, I will see it.
All right then, fair enough.
And they are like a pain to watch, and there's like weird music segments where everyone's bopping around, but the fact that they're bopping around is what draws my interest in. It's the way they move and the way characters look. It's great. I love it. Lastly, I watched the new A Star Is Born.
Oh yeah, we talked about that. You talked about that when we, I'll talk about it a little bit more. But we actually watched one of our movies today together for a change over online, which was a whole other odyssey. But
Yeah.
yeah, I remember you talking.
Did
about
I
it.
mention I? Oh, did I mention I saw it?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, okay. I had forgotten.
Yeah, you didn't really say much about it, but you just said you'd seen it.
Well, I loved it. I really did.
Really?
I'm not gonna lie. I loved it. I have been seeing stuff online about it. Especially after the Oscars happened, people complaining about the movie, saying they don't know why it was Best Picture. Some people were complaining about the number they did at the Oscars. I don't know. I really liked it. I agree with what they're saying about Bradley Cooper singing, but when he and Lady Gaga do the duets, either his voice just complements hers or it just blends in behind hers. I don't really notice. I will agree when he does his own stuff, it can be like jarring to me. But there were also people saying that Lady Gaga was a bad actress. I thought she was fine. I believed in what she was saying. I thought her emotions seemed genuine for like what the purpose that they were served. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a great movie.
Would you say it was the best of the ones that we have watched? Or are you going to have to save that for a potential future episode?
I would have to save it for a potential future episode. I think it might be. I think I might think it's better than the 37 version, but What Price Hollywood still has my heart.
Of course.
I still like it a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's a scene in the movie. I'm going to talk about this real quick. Mm-hmm. It's not even at the halfway point. It's before that. She knows that she made it big. I think her name is Allie, I think, in the movie. That's like her stage name too. Is just Allie. It's like Cher. But she knows she made it big because they want her to be the musical guest on SNL. And it's weird because they like go to the SNL set and there's cameras everywhere, and Alec Baldwin is there hosting because that's like his job now. Is he like is the live-in host of Saturday Night Live?
I mean, that's the cool fact is like they're like he and Christopher Walken are the only two people in the industry who have basically an open invitation at any time. Whenever they have free time, they can host.
I wonder what that's.
They can just come by and just be like, "I'd like to host." If you don't have anyone set yet,
you know, that is something that I was thinking while I was watching the movie. Though, is the fact that Alec Baldwin is there introducing her. He goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, Allie." The fact that he's there means that this is like an open universe where Alec Baldwin is constantly hosting SNL, or at least he has a free ticket to host it, which means that it's also the universe where he's doing his Donald Trump impressions on SNL. Which means that Donald Trump was... the president was probably watching that episode of SNL with Allie on it. And he probably got on Twitter and was like, I don't like this. This is bad music.
This is...
her first big break and she ruined it.
This is the expanded universe I want to hear from. Like, it's one where Lady Gaga doesn't exist anymore, I guess. Or if she does, this Allie girl gets mistaken for her all the goddamn time.
Great way to start off a career. Musical guest on lowest rated show by Loser Lorne.
Oh, God.
Sad.
Let's move right along from this. We don't want to get too political just yet.
Okay. So real quick because that's all I've been watching, but I want to bring up the Oscars just shortly. Mm-hmm. The only thing I want to talk about is probably the award that no one cares about at all, and it's Best Visual Effects. Now, I already spoke to you a little bit about this.
Yeah, you did. Well, at least on the group chat.
This kind of angers me a little bit. It kind of does, because I think after I watched the movie, I talked about it on the show, saying it's up for visual effect. First Man is up for visual effects, and I don't know.
I'm guessing you're referring to First Man.
Yeah, that's why I said it again. I said it is because I realized I hadn't said it. First Man is what ended up. First Man won. The one about the Armstrong.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watched it, I came on this show, and I did the whole what we've watched, and I said I don't know why it's up for visual effects, because I think it's pretty standard. Now, the people in the visual effects team, like, they're doing their job, and it no doubt looks good for what it is, but it wasn't doing anything spectacular. I've seen a ton of space movies that show, like, rockets taking off, or, I don't know, a red blinking light because something's failing. I didn't get it. I don't understand. And I even said, like, Ready Player... Sorry?
I still haven't seen it, but I can definitely take your word for it. And from all the clips, from what few clips and trailers I've seen, it really doesn't look that impressive that way.
Yeah. Avengers Infinity War? Haven't seen it. I just talked about the Marvel stuff and that I don't really care. But the clip they showed at the Oscars, I think, showed off how visually stunning that movie looks. Ready Player One, I hate the movie, but it looks great.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really do not know why.
I think it's basically for that very reason, where people are just like, look, we don't want to give shit to fucking Ready Player One or an Avengers movie. Like, we're better than that.
And I think that's why a lot of people get mad. I think that's why a lot of people, like, get mad at the Oscars, is because it's either it's not even either. Like, I don't think it should be pop culture just oriented, where all of the movies nominated are Marvel things or DC things because for some reason they still make money. I don't think that, but discluding hard work that actually looks good just like on principle, I don't know that I agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I haven't agreed with the Oscars for years now, so I don't really care that much anymore. And so, with like the exception of last year, because I just think Guillermo del Toro deserves recognition. But beyond that, I literally could not give less of a shit about him these days. And
Yeah,
mostly
I
because
know what
like
you mean.
this year kind of sealed it when they did the whole thing where some Oscars were given during commercial breaks, which like,
That was also upset. Well, Guillermo del Toro did a big thing on Twitter talking about like he was trying to rally against it.
yeah. So
Like
it's
that's a disgrace. I can't believe this.
yeah,
Oh.
it just really kind of just speaks volumes of the whole thing. It's like, hey, you know what's something that would save you more time if you didn't have 8 fucking things up for Best Picture. It's like
Yeah,
Christ.
they have to show so many clips. I didn't know that there were that. Like I watched the Oscars. I watched a bit of them last year. I definitely watched more the year before. I don't remember there ever being that many musical segments ever.
Yeah, they tend to be trimmed down really hard, but this I guess this time around they just didn't.
This year they did a number for like every. Do they always do that though? I think they might have, but maybe it's just shorter. They did one for every like best original song. They apparently an original song from Ballad of Buster Scruggs was up, and they did like a duet cowboy thing on stage.
Oh yeah, like
And I was just like looking at my watch, like this is longer than I thought. Like even remember it being.
right. Was it the song about like angel, like a cowboy gets his wings or something?
Yeah, it was that one.
Yeah, it's when Buster Scruggs dies. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, well, they showed the clip of him ascending to heaven, so I don't
Oh
think anyone in the world doesn't know anymore.
yeah, no, it's like that was one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Well, there you go. I guess that is why it was up. But that's all
Yay!
I wanted to say about the Oscars. I don't have anything to say about Best Picture or any of that. I just wanted to
Yeah,
ask why.
it's just one that to me personally it just wasn't that big of a year for movies.
Yeah, I mean, also that was the year that we started our show. I've been watching more. I mean, I always watched older stuff, but I've been watching a lot of things that I never thought I'd watched before, and that's where my priorities were. So,
Yeah, I suppose on that note we can get to the meat of the show.
oh yeah, yeah. Let's
Talk
do
about
that before we forget what we're talking about.
to talk about the 1981 and 2010 version of the Greek, epic. I wouldn't call either of these epic. The Greek movies Clash of the Titans. We start in the 1981 version with the director being Desmond Davis and the writer Beverly Cross. I'm going to start crediting writers, screenwriters, etc. whenever they are at least available, so proper credit can be given since so many of these movies live and die on their writing, which we'll get to. Yes. Based on the Greek myth of Perseus, the film opens with King Acrisius of Argos casting his daughter and grandson into the sea as due to the daughter having laid with Zeus, played by Laurence Olivier, and bearing his child. For this treachery, Zeus kills Acrisius and has Poseidon, played by Jack Willem, release the Kraken, the final living titan, to destroy all of Argos. Both the daughter and the child, however, survive being thrown into the sea and eventually wash ashore to a new island, where the boy, Perseus, played by Matt Hamlin, grows to young adulthood as a fisherman. Fisher? Either way. One day, years after these initial events, in the city of Joppa, the Prince Calibos, played by Neil McCarthy, is slated to be married to the Princess Andromeda, played by Judy Boker. However, he is cursed for having committed assorted crimes against the gods, and Zeus specifically, having... I think there's a brief mention that he killed off almost all of the winged horses, all save for Pegasus. And as a result, he is cursed and thrown out of favor with, his soon-to-be wife and the rest of the city. In response to this, Thetis, patron goddess of Joppa and mother of Calibos, played by Maggie Smith, transports Perseus to Joppa and into the company of the poet Ammon, I'm going to go with Amon, played by Burgess Meredith. After after waking up the next morning and receiving several gifts from Zeus, and a helmet of invisibility, a super powerful sword, and the mirror shield, he learns that Andromeda, within Joppa, has been cursed by Calibos to force any suitor of hers to answer a riddle of Calibos' creation, at threat of the suitor's death if they fail. Perseus, in response, sneaks into Andromeda's chambers and is able to follow as she is taken back to Calibos' lair, where he confronts and threatens Calibos to release the curse or be killed. Calibos agrees to this, and Perseus returns to Joppa to reveal his actions. He then correctly answers the riddle given by Calibos and is set to marry Andromeda. However, Calibos, returning back to the proper city of Joppa, prays to the statue of his goddess mother for retribution against all of Joppa, as Thetis is unable to act directly against Perseus, him being chosen by Zeus and all this sort of nonsense. At the wedding the next day, Thetis reveals herself and declares that the city will be destroyed in 30 days unless Andromeda is sacrificed to the Kraken. To prevent this, Perseus, several guards, and the guard captain Thallo, played by Tim Pigou-Smith, quest to find the Kraken's weakness. They first do this by visiting the Stygian witches, in this one played by Flora Robson, Anna Manahan, and Freda Jackson, who are all-seeing mystical oracles who are able to reveal that the only way to defeat the Kraken is with the head of Medusa, the one mortal Gorgon who can turn the Kraken to stone, obviously. And so they head to her lair just at the edge of the underworld and, confront her and eventually decapitate her. However, after the success, in the end, all but Perseus are killed between attacks from Medusa and from Calibos returning and unleashing a legion of giant scorpions. Perseus eventually returns to Joppa completely exhausted, and with the help of Pegasus is able to reach the shore's edge where Andromeda is set to be sacrificed to the Kraken, and just in the nick of time uses the head to turn the Kraken to stone, saves the day, and is able to marry Andromeda in peace and live out his life thereafter. Now I will place out the differences in the 2010 version for a couple things, which is relatively straightforward, but there's just enough that it's a little weird. So, now instead of the city being Joppa, we remain in the city of Argos, having not been destroyed by the Kraken. Acrisius, having thrown Perseus and his mother into the sea, is actually cursed to become Calibos instead of just being outright killed. Instead of it being his daughter being thrown into the sea with her child, it's actually his own wife who had laid with Zeus. Perseus, and this same woman doesn't actually survive being thrown into the water. And it's actually also brought more into the limelight that Perseus was adopted by a fisherman named Spiros, who is then promptly killed by Hades, who is now the main villain instead of Calibos and Sword of Thetis. And so, beyond that, a few scenes are kind of changed in order or importance. The main thread of the Kraken is established pretty much immediately, instead of it being kind of the secondary threat after dealing with Calibos and everything. Most of Calibos' story is cut entirely, for that matter. Let's see. Amon, who is kind of the lore expert in the first one, is replaced by the demigod Io, an immortal woman who's been following Perseus for most of his life. Perseus is a bit more active to reject his godly heritage, and in the end, Perseus actually leaves the city instead of staying behind to marry Andromeda. So that's pretty much that, save for a couple other things. But we'll get into the ones that are just flat out stupid later.
Yeah, I think that nicely wraps it up.
Yeah.
Yep. So before we start talking, I'm going to go into full circle real quick. Okay, so not a lot going into it this time, though I do have something I want to cover near the end that I thought was interesting. So for 1981's Clash of the Titans, we have John Palmer, who was producer on that version of Clash of the Titans and also was production manager on 1973's The Day of the Jackal.
Oh.
Yes.
I I did actually see online that this was actually a American and British film.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that would make sense. We got some British actors
Mm. I
in
guess
that
that's a
film, like
Laurence
Maggie
Olivier.
Smith and Laurence Olivier. Yeah. Um, and the London Symphony Orchestra performed the music for both this 80s version of Clash of the Titans and Return to Oz.
Hmm.
So we got those two connections right there. And then we have one for Clash of the Titans 2010. Please forgive me. Damon Damon Damankos Pardanyi. I feel so terrible. Uh, I actually did look up pronunciation on this and I could not find it, so I just had to take a stab at it.
All right.
But he did stunt work in both Clash of the Titans 2010 and Blade Runner 2049.
Hmm.
That's pretty much it, though.
I expect a lot more in this, the new one, with since it was a game of hey that guy.
Yeah, it's just the stuff that we've covered so far. Surely a lot of these people will be showing up later,
Yeah.
which is actually something I'm about to go into. So, Sian Phillips, who played Cassiopeia in Clash of the Titans 1981,
Mm-hmm.
is in David Lynch's production of Dune, which is, we've got a cast list out right now, so it's presumably in development, the remake or the redo of the book.
Wow.
So we could be seeing her again should we choose to do an episode on Dune.
I would love to, honestly.
So would I. But that's not all. She was also briefly married to Peter O'Toole, who was T.E. Lawrence in Lawrence of Arabia.
Oh
There,
yeah.
there's a sequel, a later sequel, much later, so we would be able to cover that. A later sequel to Lawrence of Arabia, where T.E. Lawrence is played by Ralph Fiennes, who was Hades in the new Clash of the Titans. Also in this sequel to Lawrence of Arabia, Prince Faisal is played by Alexander Siddig, who was Hermes in the new Clash of the Titans. So
Weird casting for that.
yeah,
And also incredibly brief scene altogether. But again, we'll go into that.
yeah, I just thought that was interesting. There's some neat crossover there for
It's
two
like
different episodes that we could do in the future.
Huh. Well then.
Oh, that's that. That's the end. That's all I wanted to say.
It's a full circle plus a couple later loops that could potentially become circles.
Some possible wraparound in the near future or late future. Who knows?
But do you want to do the lead for first opinion, since I picked it this time around? Kind of let you get some expositing in if you have any particular opinions. I figured you'd want to take up about like Harryhausen and that sort of stuff.
Okay, I mean that's fair. So, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not too familiar with Harryhausen's work outside of, well, now this, but also Jason and the Argonauts, which I think is like pretty famously worked on by him.
Oh yeah.
I know they tried to get him back for the 2010 version, and he declined vehemently because he didn't think that any of his films needed to be remade. I mean, besides that, like you said before, we did watch it together, and as much as we were laughing at things, we were laughing at stuff that wasn't his work too, like some
obviously
weird
like
green screening and cropped out people.
This is among some of the worst green screening I have ever seen in a professional movie.
Oh yeah, it's pretty bad. What was that one scene when he first arrives in Argos? And Joppa, you're right. I'm getting
which is going to be so annoying because like how they change that around, but whatever.
Yeah, but so he arrives there, and there's like a shot with a statue like green screened in front of a city, which is possibly another green screen. But then it shows a close up of him, and it's just the real statue there, like full scale. Yeah. So what was the point?
It baffles me. It may have even just been that the green screen behind it was so bad that it made some of the other objects look like they were in a green screen.
That's possible, yeah.
That's the only thing I could possibly imagine it being.
But I mean, I have always sort of felt this way, primarily with puppets. I think stop motion is cool to an extent, but I think puppets are where my heart truly lies,
Oh
which is
yeah,
like purely like 70s into 90s era. Uh,
it was a very brief niche, which I've talked about before.
yeah, but
Which
I
I guess
mean,
with movie technology in general, they're very rarely niches that last longer than 2 decades.
it depends on how long that it takes for technology to update itself.
Yeah.
However, they still they still have like a lot of character, the designs, and you can tell a lot of like the work that was being put into it.
Oh, of
I
course.
know that what is it, Dionoskos, the two-headed
Oh
wolf
yeah,
creature.
yeah, like Dionysus.
Dionoskos, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know that that creature was going to be like three-headed, similar to Cerberus, but apparently like a third head would have just been way too much work for
Hmm.
Harryhausen, so they cut it down to two.
And I think that Dionysus might be a real Greek creature, but I'd have to go back and check. I haven't brushed up on my mythos that much lately, which is another thing. Like I was very geared up to talk about the original myth of Perseus and everything because it's one of the more famous ones in Greek myth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like bash on a whole bunch of different things, like how Perseus never had actually used the Pegasus. That was another guy, Bellerophon, or like how him saving Andromeda was actually kind of a side thing that just kind of popped up on his way back from defeating Medusa. Um, and he just so happened to just slay a sea monster around that time. But then I realized it's like this is really dragging away from the fact that these are just two movies. It's like these are kind of their own thing right now, and so I'll
At
probably
the
drop in like facts about Greek myth and everything. But other than that, I wanted to try and avoid it.
right, and I mean at that point, it's like how closely do you have to stay to an adaptation, especially when you start getting into mythology,
Right.
because there are potentials for different interpretations, and mythology is based in the fact that they're huge universes that like tie into itself, so
Mm.
they can reuse the characters in different way. Like when you were talking about the differences with between the two films, and you brought up the fact that now Hades is the villain.
Mm.
Literally Hades. I
Yeah.
did digging. Maybe I missed something, but from all the research I did, it was just as we were talking about when we were watching the movie. Hades has been a villain ever since Disney depicted him as a villain.
Yep.
And that's just influenced our view of that particular
Of that
god, I guess.
character. Yeah, that
Character,
god.
yeah.
It's
I
like
hesitate to say character in case there's any big believers out there right now.
I mean, like I'm sure there's still a few
Yeah, probably.
like active participants, if only because it's like trendy nowadays or something. I've been seeing more and more people just being like openly talking about how they're pagan, which is like
Huh.
all
Okay.
right, but it's kind of just your deal as long as you're not like killing goats and stuff. It's
That's
just,
fine. Yeah.
if you own goats, I guess I can't really complain, but still, just as long as you're not like stealing and hurting goats for no reason. Anyway,
Because
yeah,
that's a sin.
but yeah, it's like and that's always just the Hades being the villain. That's just been a trope I've always thought was really tired. Like it's like I think there's maybe two myths about when Hades actually did shit that was actually kind of hardcore, and it was completely justified in both cases. Like in one case, it was Sisyphus who literally imprisoned his buddy Death and screwed him over like 3 times. And then the other time was when these two guys came down to the underworld attempting to kidnap and marry his wife. And so he responded to that by lashing them to chairs and like horrible, with like horrible spiny vines and everything.
Right. I mean,
Which like
to an
both
extent,
cases,
he
fair enough.
kidnapped his own wife, but
I mean, yeah, that's true.
I'm
Still,
sure she likes it down there now, anyways.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, there. I mean, there's things like that when you're taking interpretations where you just got to be like, okay, well, you can see the ties, but there's different avenues that they took for this production that make it either they make it more theatrical or they get more juice out of this character because they need an emotional moment right here.
Mm.
Andromeda is tied more heavily to the plot because it's like a romantic interest in one case, and
Yes.
in the other they supplement.
With
Okay, we'll
Io.
talk about that later.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that because that's not what we're talking about right now.
Right.
So yeah, I mean stuff like that. It's fair to still look back on it, but
And I
I
did
think,
think,
can we please be past the point where people read a book, they see the movie, and they throw a fit?
yeah, like
Can we
that's fair.
please?
Like we need to realize at this point, like we all know that when a book goes to a movie, it's gonna be different. Can we enjoy something for what it is, or bash something for what it is?
I don't care how much of a fan you are of that 600-page book. I think you'd get pretty tired of it if it was adapted into a movie word for word. Just read the book.
Yeah. So, like all that, and all that being said, like to get kind of like just be like to kind of go back to talking about this films more specifically. I really did think, like, and again, when you and I watched it together, we bashed the original one kind of hard in a lot of ways because like it's obviously janky and a lot of times kind of unjustifiably like within like reason to be critical of it because like at this point Star Wars had already been out and its effects are amazing. They still stand up today, and they clearly must have just had like a small budget for this and they didn't have a whole lot of chances to have big sets to kind of give an impression of like the size of Joppa or just any kind of Greek towns in that kind of sense, or and even they had a pretty good system going with the environmental shots they were having. All that being said, though, the story really does feel, of the two of these, feels more like a real Greek myth. Like a lot of it, I kind of bashed it because the main character, the main actor who plays Perseus, Harry Hamlin, he kind of falls into like that 70s 80s main hero trope where they're not really modern. Main characters tend to have a tendency to be like very grizzled, very straight, tough, hard feature types. Whereas in the 70s and 80s, they tended to be more kind of like beach guys, like they're very tan, kind of supple, kind of features and everything. And I gave that a lot of crap, mostly because like he had this tendency that he has these really big pouty lips, and he kept his mouth open all the time throughout the film.
You always see that front row of teeth.
Exactly, which I can't even give crap for because they do the exact same thing in the 2010 version. They just do it more with like harsh grimaces than anything, so it just seems kind of, I guess, a bit more appropriate. But like everyone in that movie has a harsh grimace at all times. No one's freaking smiling.
It's probably the case.
And just to wrap up the point is like I actually think, thinking back on it, Harry Hamlin actually made the best Perseus for this because that definitely would have been how the Greek myth would have looked. He would have been this young, strapping type who's very clearly a bit full of himself, but he's actually genuinely very good at what he's doing. And so I thought on it, and I was like, yeah, that's actually, the casting in this was actually really good.
Yeah, I mean, he influenced the actual production of the movie, too. I
Really?
know in the original script for the 81 version, Perseus was to kill Medusa by throwing his shield at her because it was supposed to appeal to standards and practices, apparently, rather than just cutting it off.
Right.
So they knew they were changing it, but they were trying to do it for that reason. Like, well, maybe they'll go easier on us if it's like I don't know, a blunt object, but I assume he'd be throwing it like a disc. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, he didn't like that it didn't keep with the myth in that aspect, so he like holed up in his trailer apparently and wouldn't come out until they fixed it.
Wow.
And the producers, including Harryhausen, they were all very mad at him. But
I mean, props too. I mean, that's it. I think the best scene in the whole movie is the Medusa fight. In my opinion.
My favorite is the one where the mechanical owl falls into the river.
Oh yeah, fucking Bubo.
I don't know why he falls into the river though.
I think didn't he get like a rock thrown at him by like Calibos or something?
Maybe.
I generally don't remember. I should also just point out briefly. There's a funny mechanical owl that follows Perseus around for a portion of the original one. It just like he's a very minor character and he kind of is meant to serve as a guide, but it's kind of inconsequential. But yeah, that's and they make a blatant reference to it in the new one, but it's I'm not even gonna really mention it at length.
Yeah, he's R2D2.
Yeah, he's out. He's a cheap R2D2. Yeah.
He's literally R2. You know what? You were talking about Star Wars. The budget on that is like, even if I don't know the exact budget on it, so I'm not going to stipulate, but it still does look amazing. You're right; it does hold up for the time.
I mean, it even holds up today in a lot of ways.
And I haven't seen it in a long. I haven't seen Star Wars in a long time, but if I remember correctly, it is there. I don't think there's any stop motion. It is puppets.
Yeah, it should be.
It is puppets for all of its creatures, and I mean that's already right there. That's the late 70s. You're moving towards puppetry rather than stop motion. It's like that's sort of the generational divide right there. So for Harryhausen to be working on this project in 81 despite the size of the budget, we were going to get claymation characters no matter what, because when the script for this movie was written, it was taken straight to Harryhausen to make.
Huh.
So they went into this knowing, yeah, this is a claymation monster movie. That's what we're doing. Or not claymation, that's copyrighted. Stop motion monster movie.
And I think they really did it justice for the kind of creatures they had on display. Because I mean, even in like, it's actually kind of cool to think about it with old Greek myths. Like so many of so many stories are put on terracotta pots and everything. It even kind of gives the imagery to the myths that we have, and like the design of Medusa and all that sort of thing. It's really cool to see that in actual like animation clay and everything. So it actually kind of gives the impression of these original designs, and it gave a very visceral look to all the creatures. Again, like my personal favorite being Medusa, which the new one is cool, but it's just another thing, which I'll talk about. And I like, and I give it a lot of crap, like when there's direct interaction between live characters and the animated creatures. It's kind of stilted, but again, they're the best effects in the movie. So
yeah, I'm specifically thinking of when they're stabbing at the scorpions or at Dionysos.
Yeah,
specifically, as you can see, like you can see the green screen of the creature as well as the motion of the creature compared to the motion of the live action people.
Yeah, it's a bit rough.
It really is. I mean, it's this. So the animation for stop motion, I've never been a fan of, because, well, at least for those types of projects nowadays, people do stuff and it's really fluid. But back then it's really rough. It can be hard for me to get into just looking at it. Like this is hard to watch because of how jittery it is. But animation, movement, whatever you want to call it, is a different discussion than like design. And just as stills, if you were to just take the model of like the Kraken or a faraway shot of Calabas with his tail and like just have it rotating, just looking at the way it was sculpted and designed and how unique it is, like that's cool. Like I think all of the designs are like
very impressive.
I think they're great in this film. That's something that really bothers me when people are talking about like cartoons nowadays and posting on the internet. That's something they always tend to get wrong, is they're like, well, all animation is like similar nowadays. Okay, well, first of all, you're not talking about animation. I can tell from the photos you're showing, you're talking about art design, which is different than animation. Animation is like the movement of the designs.
Correct.
So you're already wrong there, but then you're also wrong because these are like completely different looking and you don't know what you're talking about. You just saw that weird CalArts thing where it's drawing main characters' faces over and over again. But anyways, not to get off topic.
Not to get too cartoon rant.
Yeah, for something like this, like there are things to like and there are things to hate about the medium that they chose to go with, or no, that they chose because they knew that's what they were getting. And while maybe it doesn't necessarily hold up, it still draws your attention, whether for wow, that looks great, or wow, that looks terrible. It's still something to sort of look at. I don't
Mm.
know. The 2010 Clash of the Titans, like the Scorpions specifically, I just thought they were boring.
I mean, a little, yeah. But
It's not like they're that different from the stop motion designs because they're just giant scorpions, but all the dun running over I've talked about this countless times in like
right, yeah.
Total Recall and whatever. For me, it's like a standard action scene. It's not necessarily sci-fi, but it's like rolling around this thing, dun dun dun, and I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, and that
you want to talk?
Yeah, that was one of the main things I was going to get into with like
reorganize my thoughts.
It's like, and like first off, let me just say I did actually. I mean, like, say for like the genericness, but again, that's what I'm about to go into. I did actually really like a lot of the visuals in the 2010 version. It at least felt more consistent with itself. And there were a lot of things that I genuinely thought were like, oh, okay, that's really cool of a concept. Like the Jinn characters that come in, I think their design is awesome. It's like this, like kind of cool, craggy, like mix of stone and human flesh and everything kind of thing going on.
Yeah, like I like that you can sort of see like their stone skeleton, especially as like revealed later.
And then I think the Kraken in the end was done really well. Argos as a city was at least interesting. It wasn't as generic as I thought it would end up, like as I remembered it. Which I should say, I watched this movie a long time ago, like whenever it flipped on a TV. But the problem with that is I didn't remember any of it coming into this because my God, this movie is generic. Like,
yeah,
like there, I could just list. I literally had a sub list within my list of talking points that goes on for like 6 points, talking about specific things about it. Like, it's the same kind of, instead of it being in the original where it was kind of the random and oftentimes not really coherent ramblings of gods, it's boiled down to the big main god is going up against the main evil god. So basically it's just God versus Satan. That's pretty much it. That's the setup. Like, that's all you need. It's this whole, like, the main character, and I should actually say, I think really quick, I'm going to list off some of the actors for the new one because I didn't actually get around to doing that.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's got Sam Worthington playing Perseus. It has Liam Neeson playing Zeus. Ralph Fiennes as Hades. I guess Gemma at Arterton as Io, which is the kind of immortal lore expositor. Alexa Davalos as Andromeda, Jason Fleming as Calibos / Acrisius, Mads Mikkelsen as the Guard Commander Draco, and the late Pete Postlethwaite as Spiros, which is Perseus' adoptive father. Yeah, I should have mentioned, and back to my points. Sam Worthington as this guy, like, I'm sure he's a good actor and everything. Like, he was decent in Avatar. I know people give him a lot of crap for that, but he was, for the character he was doing, he was good. But my God, like, his entire personality just boiled down to aggressively humble, which is the most boring shit in the world, because he's just constantly just being like, I am not a god, I am just a simple man, as he's doing all this crazy stuff and everything. It's like, stop trying to exposit yourself as this simple person when you are literally everything around you is telling you that you're meant to be better than this. And that there
was a real almost cringeworthy mic drop moment, I remember, where he's talking to the king and the guards. Mm-hmm. And one of them says, "You're a god," and he goes, "I do not wish to be," and everyone's silent. And it's like, that was their selling moment right there. They imagined people posting that online, that image capture online, and
like that's the the quote people are going to have, tattooed on them.
Yeah, not release the Kraken. It's it's going to be that one right there. I do not choose to be.
Yeah, fucking, and let me just say, Liam Neeson steals it for anything. Like, anytime anyone remembers anything, it's about him. Like, either mostly just the release the Kraken quote.
Pretty well. I was a big fan of Hades.
Yeah, I I liked his design at least. I thought his again, being a fan of Greek myth, I thought his personality was bullshit, but still.
Yeah, I know a lot of people like compare. I mean, for all the people that are always talking about Clash of the Titans, the big Clash of the Titans fandom out there, but people tend to compare his voice for Hades with Voldemort. Some
Yeah,
carryover there, and I was
I
like,
guess,
there
yeah.
is a bit there, but
Kind of
it's a
channeling
lot.
Christian Bale on it more than anything.
Yeah, it's for his Hades interpretation, it's a lot more reserved. Like it's
Mm.
even more of a whisper, almost like he's gonna die the next sentence. And I really like that. I like the way he
I did like
looks.
that, yeah.
My favorite shot in the movie probably is, well, not my favorite shot, but maybe my favorite moment. There are other shots that I think look better, but
Mm.
when he first shows up in the Argos Palace,
Oh yeah,
and
and like
after he sucks them up, the creation of the tornado, and then him turning around and opening like his cloak and it's spitting everything out. I thought that looked cool.
oh yeah, like there's a lot of I'll go back into my like rant about genericness here in a second, but there are a lot of like really cool like quick action sequences in this that I really like that action that he did. Um, like a lot of the actions whenever they were fighting the scorpions, the Medusa fight was pretty cool. Like a lot of the action I thought was a lot better than in the original one, which is to be expected. You know, it's a modern movie; they're going to turn the action up to 11. Problem is that's the only thing they did to
Yeah.
11.
Also,
It's
real
just
quick, I'm gonna put down IMDb's trivia section real quick. I don't know who put that trivia there, but it caused me to
sure.
rewatch that Hades scene with the guards like 3 times. They said that the Wilhelm scream was there. I didn't hear it, and
Huh.
that's a scream that I like really hate and am so tired of people just putting in movies like, wouldn't it be funny if we did the thing everyone does all the time?
Yeah,
So I
yeah, good
feel
point.
like I would have heard it the first time, but I still went back and checked and I did not hear the thing. So random user, you are wrong.
Yeah.
It is not there.
Yeah. It's just and like yeah, and I was thinking back over just a bunch of random points I have it, but there's so little to be said about so much of it because it keeps falling back into its tropes. And I should say I'm not about to say I'm like bashing this movie as hard as I was like Ghost of the Shell and everything. I actually quite like this movie a lot. It's just that everything outside of its visuals and kind of the ambitious stuff it was trying to do with kind of having an overly large mythos and world, it's pretty insubstantial. Like this is some of the worst dialogue I've heard in a while. Um,
Mm,
it's very just there to fill space kind of crap, like very generic. Like you're meant to do this, you're meant to do that. Like this is who we are. Like man is the greatest bullshit, whatever the hell. It's
yeah.
and it's also really inconsistent with that same message because like the whole plot of it is that the main driver in this plot is that, and this time around, mankind, or really rather just Argos, like it keeps going on like, oh, mankind eternal. It's like, no, it literally has only been focused on Argos right now. Like the people of Argos have basically just are now kind of denouncing the gods because they're just kind of tired of them. And literally every time they do, a god or some level shows up and just completely creams them because it's like, why are y'all doing this? And then in the end, the message is still like the only person, literally, they even say on multiple occasions, flat out, the only person capable of saving us is this person because of his godliness. It's like, so are the gods bad or good then? Like, you literally just said that the only reason he's the hero is because he's part god. And yet
Well,
you hate the gods.
the gods aren't necessarily bad either because remember, Zeus finds out Hades turned on him for like 5 seconds, and then he goes to Perseus after he wins, and he's like, "I was wrong," blah blah blah, which was a scene that was totally earned. Uh,
Yeah, sure.
him turning back around and being like, "You know what? I was wrong the first time." Because you like Hades made you feel a little queasy for
Yeah.
a second. I don't. There are a lot of moments like that that I don't feel are earned, like things that just happen. Like, okay, Hades is not death, but his banishment back to the underworld or whatever. What was that? I
Yeah.
should mention this was my first time seeing seeing both of these. Uh,
Mm.
I cannot believe that. Like,
Like,
the Kraken is destroying everything. He does the Medusa head thing and turns it to stone, and then the demon, like, butterfly comes out of the ocean, and he's like, you cannot destroy me. And he's like, but I do. And then he does it, and then whatever.
yeah, it really was just like this whole thing of just trying to wrap things up. Like
It's
it's
like, we've been here
so
too long. Come on.
the whole plot of this thing. It's just it really desperately wants these characters to not be literal gods because it means that they have to be like, oh shit, how are we gonna beat these guys? Like, and I'm saying this from the perspective of like the writers, not the actual characters, because they're just like, oh yeah, and that's the problem with it, with what the way they were doing things. There were a bunch of tiny aspects that I loved about how they handled mythos, and then there were a bunch of the big aspects that I hated how they handled it. Because one of the big things is, I mentioned earlier, the characters encounter jinn, which are creatures from Arabian Middle Eastern myth, and they just straight up encounter them without much second thought. They even mentioned that, oh, we're now traveling in their desert, so that implies, oh, they've had to literally travel from Greece onto the Arabian Peninsula to find this information about Medusa and everything. It's like, that's really cool. That means they're mixing mythologies and everything. They're pulling in kind of a Neil Gaiman thing. And I kept thinking about it. It's like, this movie would have done amazingly as like a short limited series, where if they had, maybe every couple episodes they expanded on a different myth from, a different part of the world, and how they actually could have interacted with each other. Because that's kind of a cool experiment with, cultural ties and cultural differences and all these different things. But it just, all the cool bits that I liked were all in the background, and then all the big things that I hated were in the foreground, like how they were trying to establish Hades as this villain, but also one that could be even remotely beaten. And then they kind of have this bullshit thing at the end where he holds up his sword, and, like, I guess Zeus sends down a lightning bolt for him. And so he throws the sword, the lightning bolt hits it, and it stabs Hades, and it shoots him off into the water, into the closing crag where the Kraken had come from originally. Where it's like, what? Like, just a flat out of nowhere, oh yeah, we need to wrap this up. Gone.
Which is suspiciously familiar. Where else have I seen a demigod sending Hades down into a pool to be like, come on.
Like, come on, it's just, and that's not even giving the original, like the animated Hercules, enough credit. Like, that whole scene was incredible.
Well, because there was emotion behind it, because the characters had, like, development to their personalities and the way they interacted.
And they had development to their personalities in that they had personalities.
Yeah.
I
can't argue with that.
It just got me so badly, because there's so much to like about Greek myth and everything that they could have expanded on and everything, or just, like, worked around with better, but they just kind of took this really generic, they took what they saw as good characters and evil characters and just kind of slotted them into their respective spots. And it's just like, what? No, this doesn't work at all. You're not, like, they're literal gods. You can't do anything with this. It's just like, so many of the characters just have all these really generic moments where, there's more than one scene of, like, them, which also, like, this is another part of it, is that Perseus is, like, very naturally gifted, and that's, like, based off his original myth. Like, he was, he's a god, and he worked as a, like, as a laborer, as a fisherman for his entire life. Like, he's actually incredibly strong and incredibly gifted in a lot of these skills. And there's a few scenes over the course of their journey to try and get Medusa where, like, he has to train with either Mads Mikkelsen's character or the demigoddess lady.
Arterton.
Yeah, thank you. Where it's meant to just seem like, oh, they're doing a training montage thing or anything, but he's clearly kicking all their asses and everything, and he's still trying to have this aggressive, humble stance and all. It's like, dude, shut the fuck up. This doesn't make any sense. You can't have both the humble underdog character and the naturally gifted Greek hero at the same time. It's so dumb.
Yeah. 81 actually handled that better just because there's no weird training type
Yeah,
aspects to it. Like he has the Burgess Meredith sidekick that like informs him of lore, but besides that, he's naturally gifted and he pulls off like the plans on his own. He's not like beaten by his by his teammates. It's
yeah,
like Medusa's got a tail and she's gonna whip it like this, and they're like playing hide and seek. Like there's none of that. He's just like, well, I guess I'll go see what happens.
yeah. It's just like it, which makes sense for all that sort of thing, and it would have made sense for the context they lived within. It was also kind of a more neutral response to the populace that he was the son of Zeus, because it's like, in their world, they're like, yeah, these are things that can happen. It's Zeus. He gets with everybody if he can get a chance. And
Yeah, that's
so
the whole point.
they kind of like, they see his abilities, and plus they see his abilities when he defeats Calibos. And so he's like, they're like, oh, okay, we're going to trust him. And then, because they have to have this stupid, in the 2010 version, they have to have this stupid, really flat, one-dimensional argument of the gods suck, we hate them. They invent this conflict against everybody for him, even though they keep going back and forth with it. They keep saying either, oh, he's the son of a god, like he's so dumb and that sort of thing. And then they also say like, literally, you're the only person who can save us because of your godliness. It's like, make up your damn minds. It's so dumb. And they have to invent all this conflict with it, with everything.
Yeah, I and what was hold on. What was the point of the pumpkin and the beanpole, as those are technically called? I don't care what you want to call them. Timon and Pumbaa, uh,
Oh, yeah. The two hunter characters. And yeah, I was
Bob
kind
and
of,
Larry, whatever you want to refer to them as.
yeah, there are these two, what appear to be like maybe Egyptian of origin style hunters that accompany them on their quest to find Medusa and everything. And they're just like, they kind of established and they're sort of there, but they're not expanded on enough at any point to justify a specific scene of them coming along and everything, which is like another thing that really made me think this would have made an incredible TV series where we
I th-
literally saw, like, we could have seen these characters going to multiple cultures and actually being kind of like maybe not necessarily the main characters throughout the entire series, but we kind of just see like, oh, these guys are back, to kind of see like, how all these things could have interacted and like where all of their knowledge and experience could have come from. But instead, they're just kind of these extra little characters that have like a couple moments in the quest. Once they get to the Stygian witches, they leave and they come back up one more time at the very end, like riding a scorpion to help out a little in the final fight. But that's it. Otherwise, they're just kind of there, fight a little, leave, back, done.
yeah, I going to that really quickly since you brought it up again. I do
Mm-hmm.
like that concept, especially with them crossing that Arabian style desert of
Yeah.
like the mingling of different cultures and mythos.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that was a cool idea. That's actually something I really liked about the new God of War, where there's like
Yeah.
that one treasure room that has Celtic markings and Egyptian markings, and they have like these different mythologies that all apparently
They,
coexist.
yeah, and like all these
Um,
gods are like not necessarily literal gods, but at least these almighty beings that can all interact with each other. Which I also did like which it actually kind of implies why the Kraken exists in this, because the Kraken is of, I think, either English or Scottish myth actually,
I
and it is
read that it. I read that it was Norwegian.
Norwegian, really.
Yeah, and in the original it was Cetus or Cetus the whale.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
But yeah,
I'm
it's
not
like,
sure where the Kraken came from in terms of like it mingling into the Greek mythos, but
I think like, I think they mostly, it was brought up in the original one, I think mostly because I think people would have recognized the name of it being, it's a very famous, mythical monster. And then it's definitely not a titan, that's for sure. Like the whole like they kind of try to bring up that effect. It's like, oh, it's a titan. It's like, no, it's definitely not. It's just a sea monster.
They
And
say
like,
that in both movies. In both movies, the Stygian witches say a Titan versus a Titan, and
but even in the
neither of those characters are Titans.
it even establishes in the 2010 version that the Kraken isn't a Titan. He was made by Hades as the separate creature to defeat the Titans, which is so many kinds of wrong of the creation myth of Greek mythology. But I can't get into that. I will go on for hours.
Well, I mean, we just discussed why it's nonsense, mainly for the fact
Right.
that the Kraken isn't Greek. But
Yeah, it's so blatantly not Greek. But I do like that it kind of implies that with this mixed mythology thing, it could exist. That's a cool thing. Maybe it got like co-opted. Maybe it got like, you know, it got made by the Greeks, but it eventually made its way up to the Norwegian realm, whenever their civilization was starting to, thrive or
it's
something.
true. It's true.
So
Um, and before I lose it real quick, we're jumping all over the place, but it's because I keep remembering things. This is really unintentional.
yeah, these are very jumpy movies. I think we're fine.
For Timon and Pumbaa, I
Oh yeah,
really
the
think
hunters.
that I really think that was a case of they were intended to be comic relief to lighten the mood, but they just sort of dropped them off because they're like, well, our we these this lies elsewhere. Our focus is on something completely different. But
Right.
I'm pretty sure that was their point.
But I should also,
That's usually the point of pumpkin beanpole characters when you have like a short
yeah,
fat guy and a tall skinny guy, is that they're supposed to be comic relief.
I should also establish though, because they might come back up in it. There is actually a sequel to the 2010 movie. It's
Yes, there
the
is.
Wrath of the Titans.
I have not seen it.
I've seen part of it to my memory, and I think it's actually, to my memory, better than this one. Like it was actually kind of cool because it started just kind of doing its own thing, and like they had a cool couple design features that I liked. Like one thing they established is that the big three of Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, each of them had their own like staff like thing. Like Poseidon obviously has the trident, but then Zeus's lightning bolt is actually specifically like a staff that generate like actually becomes lightning bolts whenever he throws it. And then Hades has like this pitchfork thing. So each one has like it literally goes one prong, two prong, three prong for all the brothers.
Ah, that is
And it's
cool.
actually kind of a cool familial relationship that they all have. And
I I
it,
did read a bit about it, just seeing it, and as far as I know, um, the main antagonists, I saw Ares, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, Ares, and then Hades teaming up with Ares. I was like, do we really got to do Hades again? He was just in this one.
yeah, I thought like from what I remember, I seemed like Hades kind of gets put out of action. Like a lot of the gods get like dusted because they don't have enough prayers or something.
He might be, but from what I read, it sounded like he was a big part of the movie again.
He definitely is. I just can't remember his specific role. But
Yeesh.
like, I only bring this up because I'm sure a lot of these characters they may have been establishing that there was going to be a bunch of movies for this because they even specifically say the Stygian witches in the 2010 version, right as they're leaving, they add a bit of information where they predict Perseus's death.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and that never comes up again in this movie, but it might have come up in the sequel, or if it didn't, it could have potentially come up if they made another sequel, which they didn't. But I really did think, and that's what I'm saying with all this stuff. This really was built up to be a series of things, and it would have been so good as a TV show. It would have been amazing as a TV show. Because like I like a lot of the design and everything. I do remember it's like one scene, especially if only from the trailer of the sequel. They even have this. I think literally the whole thing with it. They actually established the Titans come back in it, so there's actually Titans in it for a change. There's this one god warrior that falls down from the sky, and it's like two torsos attached to one pair of legs, and it's shown like smashing through this battlefield, like this incredible fluid fighting motion. And I thought it was cool as hell. I just,
Mm.
I love so many of the visuals and choices for this new one, and it gives me such a back and forth visceral reaction to the whole thing because so much of everything in between is just so much nothing. And versus the original being, for all the technical crap that we give it, it's got this charm to it. Like, it really does feel like this Greek story and everything.
Yeah.
And even for all its mistakes and missteps, it really does look great for what it is. And
Yeah.
it's so hard kind of reconciling the two of them.
You know what? You keep mentioning the designs of the new one, and I do think some of the designs are cool. I think part of what holds it back, and maybe you disagree, I think the settings are way boring. I don't know who was in charge of set design or the
Mm.
production design on the environments in the new Clash of the Titans. I thought the old Clash of the Titans settings, even though some of it was green screen, I didn't think it was good in practice, but I thought the design of it was good. In this new one, I think a lot of the landscapes and like the designs of the temple, it's just boring to me.
Yeah, I do gotta agree with you there. I think the best environment for at least what was there was when they were literally fighting in the desert with the scorpions, if only because it felt very appropriate for what they were doing.
Right,
Um,
and that, but
and
that's,
at least it was just kind of simple, so it didn't do
I
anything
was gonna
special with
say,
it.
I agree with you to like its purpose for being there and the fact that they didn't have to. Oh, let's think about the architecture of this for a second. So I do agree with you there, but it's just sand.
Yeah, it
So
is, and like there's some ruins and stuff, and it's like, I think it maybe just because like I like the distinct contrast between the very bright desert and the dark scorpions and everything. I think it just made it kind of a cool effect. Um, at least the coolest effect we can get with this, like there's a lot of very samey colors going throughout. Um, but yeah, just I really I gotta agree. A lot of the environments were pretty dull. Like the one with Medusa's lair and everything, where it was I didn't even know what the hell was going on in Medusa's lair, which like
there was
I
like a
kind of
lava flow.
yeah, like it was meant to be like literally going into it because it's established to be just at the edge of the underworld. Literally going into it, we have this whole dark, almost Lovecraftian environment they're going through, which is what the Greek underworld looks like. It's meant to be dark and like a evil cave, and then we go into her cave, and all of a sudden it's like a mishmash of collapsing temples and stuff over this active lava flow and everything where it's like where the hell are we? It's like this came out of nowhere versus the original one. It's a very dark, like lit by a couple torches inner temple that you can barely see through and that you have to hunt your way through to find and avoid Medusa throughout. And it's really cool. It's very dramatic and cinematic.
Right. I
It's just yeah.
You know what? A lot of the original Clash of the Titans, like the buildings, the way the environments, we talked about the geography and how confusing it was,
Yeah.
but the more and more I think about it, especially like the caves leading into, wasn't it they got on that boat to cross the river Styx, and
Yeah, with
afterward,
Sharon.
yeah, well afterwards they go through this like dark cave, right? After
Right.
they get off the boat, but then it opens up into, it's a temple, but you can like see the sky and everything. I
Yeah.
That really reminds me of Shadow of the Colossus,
Oh
which is my
yeah.
favorite game. Like how like you'll just be traveling through this tunnel, rolling about, and then it leads to this secluded area with there's mountains that like encompass the side, and then trees on top of the mountains. But it's like an open area that is also contained,
Yeah.
and
I
I
did.
really like that.
Yeah. It the set design was really cool for that whole scene. It's just like it really just set up, that this is just how isolated it all was. It was also character development through the environment. It really just established, the myth of Medusa is that she was once incredibly beautiful, but was cursed for getting it on in one of Athena's temples with Poseidon, um, and so she was cursed to be horribly ugly and like isolated herself and was forced to be isolated into this temple. And like there's no reflective surfaces. It's super dark and everything. It's really cool to see. And she never even says anything. She's completely just a literal monster in it. Whereas in the new one, she's still like kind of pretty, but she's all CG and she like has this coy laugh going on. It's like fucking. It's basically just if they did Poison Ivy essentially.
Yeah, oi the siege.
Mm.
That's what I was saying earlier, I guess. I should have refined my statement when I was comparing the scorpions between the two films, because in all actuality, there's no real design to them. They're just big scorpions, which is
Yeah.
a pre-existing creature. But just maybe this is incredibly biased based on what I like to watch, but I just feel like the CGI scorpions were so disingenuous. Like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's that's a big scorpion. Whereas, and this is unfair. I know it's unfair because the fact that it's a 3D model that moves that way, people had to work on it. But maybe it's just the artistry of it. Like you with the stop motion, you can see Ray Harryhausen's hand in it.
Hmm.
So even though they're both pretty much the same thing, just done through different mediums, I feel more connection to the one. And I
I
know
mean,
that's not entirely fair, but
I get what you mean. I think the main thing behind it is it's all about art direction and not necessarily just about art design. And so much of the new one is just kind of steeped in this very straightforward kind of darker art palette and very by the by the book designs, where it's nothing really stands out in particular. And even the scorpions, like, yeah, they're meant to be based off actual scorpions, but they don't seem like, you know, they're giant scorpions. They should be a bit more than that. It's like
yeah,
it just there's nothing about them is particularly telling. The
that's
fact that the matter is that they grew from Calibus's tainted horrific blood. It's like they could do something with that. Like they could mix it up, like make these things actual monsters. But they're just like, no, it's just big scorpions.
that is something you were talking about earlier. Actually, not that you were talking about earlier, but I can tie it back into something like that.
Ah,
The 1981 Clash of the Titans has a hilarious credits sequence where after it's done listing all of the actors, it says the mythical creatures that played themselves, which is like the Kraken as the Kraken, stuff like
yeah.
that. Well, it says Dionysos, and then it says scorpions. So,
Yeah.
like you were saying, you think that creature exists in mythology. Well, it kind of has to because it has a name. If they just, like, a two-headed wolf, let's call it something. If they just made it up, surely they would have given a name to the big scorpions. Like, if they just
Right.
made it up, but they didn't. So, I think that's another, uh, uh, I don't know what to call it.
Like just kind of nailing the
That's
coffin.
more that's more evidence for that two-headed wolf creature being real, I think.
Yeah. Or at the very least, like, they at least put some effort into naming it, because I'm sure just like the name itself is pretty telling. Like Dio just means, well, no, Dio means no, Deo. Deo is God in Latin, which is a
Yeah,
different thing. And then
I don't know
Dio, that
Latin, but
Dio would have been the Greek word for two. And so I think it either did exist or it was a pretty straightforward thing to invent the name for it. But like,
right.
yeah, and I guess people watching it would have been like, oh, that's probably what that thing is. And then if they given like a weird name to the scorpions, they would have been like, what the fuck are those
Yeah.
things? Where are the
Who?
scorpions? And like the scorpions were pretty just blatantly scorpions in both cases.
Right.
So
Can we also talk about, speaking of the credits, the scene right before the credits in the 1981 version is like the constellations, and
oh
then the
yeah,
new movie like starts off not with like all the same constellations, but it starts off with the constellations.
yeah, that was
So
a little weird.
I don't know. It's almost like when you watch the original Clash of the Titans, it shows the whole story, and then it's like the birth of the myth or the
Oh
birth of
yeah.
the legend, and then in the new one, it's sort of like the legend exists. Now let's tell you about it. It's almost like a way of introducing it versus a way of wrapping it up, I guess.
Yeah, like one way of it I just thought about it was we joked about it at the whenever they did it in the 1981 version when we were watching it. We kind of joked about like, oh, it's like the legends will be told in the stars, and we think I think I said it's like I don't really know how well it'll be remembered, because like not everyone's gonna look at that the same way. And then like the way how the 2010 version opens up, it says all stories are written in the stars, and then it proceeds to give a completely horribly inaccurate creation myth story of the Greek myth, and I'm like, oh, that's what happened. they read it wrong.
I love.
I think that's really funny.
I love the fact that they're going through. I love the fact that they're going through like the constellations in the original, and they're like Perseus, Andromeda, Pegasus, even the vain Cassiopeia. It's like she didn't even have anything to do with this story. Why even bring her up?
Like she has very little to do. Even like she has more to do, I think, in the original myth, since she's the one who like brags about her daughter, and like ultimately almost dooms her. But
right, which she does in both of these. I just don't think that her presence like warranted. I understand that it's a real constellation, but I didn't think it warranted like 5 seconds at the end of the movie.
Right, like alongside Perseus and Pegasus, which again,
the guys that did stuff.
Yeah, which again, it's just still funny to think about. It's like Perseus never rode Pegasus in the original myth. He was like literally in the original myth, he had Hermes' sandals. That's how he got around.
How would you feel if the new Clash of the Titans ended and it was like Perseus, Andromeda, Pegasus, even the funny Timon and Pumbaa did something stupid like that?
That would be amazing, and I'd have to look up if those guys actually existed in a constellation.
Is that
You'd be
Greek?
like, really? You guys got one?
I feel like anyone can get stars nowadays.
God damn. Tiger gets his stripes, my ass.
You know what? We're not really talking about Andromeda, but since she's sort of being discussed right now.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about her that much.
Well, not just her, but do you want to talk about the love in both of these movies? Like, both these movies set up, like, sort of romance, but I don't feel either of them are warranted.
Yeah. Like,
they both have scenes of, like, either kissing or just being in love that are definitely not earned.
Yeah. Like, and like, I reiterate, the original one, it kind of made sense to me because that's how a lot of Greek heroes got their wives. It was literally just they swooped in, didn't really do anything of consequence to establish themselves romantically other than save their life, and then like not necessarily earn their love but win their love, which is a completely different thing.
Watch them sleep.
And so like in that case I was like, all right, that at least kind of makes sense, because that was the whole big thing. Like they people were chosen of merit and that sort of thing, more even like way more than modern day where it's more like about personality and actual compatibility, because he defeated Calibos and he solved the riddle when no one else could and that sort of thing. Like that's kind of cool. But then they kind of tried to do that again, but with like modern spin in the new one, where they kind of had a thing going on with Perseus and Io, which was creepy when you think about it, because it literally establishes that Io had been watching over Perseus his literal entire life since the day he was born, since he was immortal, and like saw him grow up and even established him. I've had to watch my loved ones die and everything, and like to sort of start falling in love with him. It's like, lady, you knew this guy is like a little kid.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that you're now infatuated with him is a little weird.
No, it is a little creepy, but I don't like either of them. Okay,
no,
I don't mean
fine.
The movies, but the way that the subplots are set up. I don't like the way either of them are handled.
Oh yeah, but no, it's the first one. I should just say it's like I don't like it either. I just think it's at least more accurate to the myth at the very least.
Right. And the 2010 one it's completely inaccurate to the myth, especially in that regard.
Oh yeah,
he's
absolutely.
Just, you should rule. No, you rule. I'm gonna like go. And then he talks to Zeus, and Zeus is like, I got you a present, a woman, and then revives Io.
Which Io dies in the 2010 one. Like,
oh yeah, sorry.
Calibos comes back up out of nowhere and like kills her, and then like kind of that's that, and she has this really generic death speech, yada yada. Anyway,
I keep forgetting about Cal. We're gonna talk about him in a sec too.
Yep.
And that's not done very well either. I don't think there's a lot of build up for him to care about her death over someone else, another person that was with him that literally just died too. I'm pretty sure. Um, well, it was after the temple, so a bunch of people died in there.
Yeah, like Draco, the Mads Mikkelsen commander character,
The
and everything.
Jinn
The Jinn.
did a
Literally everyone else
suicide.
died in that last one. So, other than Timon and Pumbaa, but they'd already left. So
They went to eat bugs.
yeah.
But the thing is that while that's not unearned, while that is not earned, all of the romance between them and the heavy emphasis on caring, at least there you can see some work there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can see the work that's being done, but you can also see the strings. In that,
Yeah.
um, I don't feel like he should be having that reaction necessarily, but they build toward that short scene where she's helping him to prepare for taking down Medusa, and she's the one that tells him about all of this information, like, yes, Zeus is your father, I've been watching over you since. So at least there's connection there. Do I think that there's romance there? No. And do I think that there should be some there? No. But at least they tried. And the other is definitely more accurate, but I guess from a storytelling perspective in movies, I guess, for a more modern audience.
Yeah, you're still meant to enjoy it. Like,
yeah, it's not just,
it's not
well, that's the way things are. I can definitely respect that, but the characters are just sort of doing things at that point.
Yeah, like,
So,
it's cool for a myth and like a lesson to teach like kids and everything and like that sort of deal, or like, not to commit certain crimes or whatever the hell myths would be used for back then. But it's like, as it stands, we're watching these people and we've taken time out of our lives to do something.
yeah,
Which, like, oh my
there
god,
should be motivated actions.
if there were ever a phrase for me to describe the original one, it would have just been do something, because that's one point that I have not brought up, is that, my god, does it drag. It is 2 hours and there's so many scenes that are just like scenes of them traveling or walking or climbing or whatever, and that are just constantly repeated ad nauseum, or scenes where they're like establishing shots to establish like emotion and eyeline shots between characters and actions that are happening, in another shot, and it just keeps cutting. Like, the normal reaction to establish action or an eyeline sight would be start one shot on character looking towards where implied action is happening, cut away to show implied action, and then cut back to original character to see further reaction, and then let the scene proceed as it would. In the 81 version, it would cut back and forth like 4 times before anything happens. Yeah. It's the most annoying crap. It takes like 30 solid seconds for anything to happen.
As of recording this, we watched this movie like almost a week ago.
Yeah.
I had completely forgot about that. They just did close-up shots, and I think my theory was they're trying to be like, well, there's emotion here, so of course we got to show a close-up of the character's face, but then they just wouldn't do or say anything. They wouldn't even like furrow their brows. They just stare.
Yeah, it's just like
blankly.
Like, and I give the new one for having crap about there not being personalities and everything, but at least they were like at times at least active, maybe not necessarily expressive, but they kind of like had reactive interactions with things. It just, the original ones, they were just kind of just there in a lot of the cases. They were just kind of like going from one scene to the next, like, here we are, here are things, doing a couple things, and we're gone. It's just, it really felt very flat in a lot of ways. Which I don't know if it's better or worse compared to the other one.
I think I'd say 2010 has a leg up on the original in terms of emoting.
Yeah, it does help
in a lot of ways. Even if you don't buy it, at least you can tell they're trying in a lot of cases.
Right. And I said that the new one's casting wasn't great, but at least like the actors who are there are still like, top-notch actors and everything. Like, I did say before, it's like a game of, hey, that guy. Like, there's a bunch of random characters, like a bunch of the guards that help Perseus out. Like, one of them's the guy who plays the young Beast character in the new X-Men movies. One of them is a a character in Game of Thrones, like this kind of elderly kind of advisor character to Jon Snow or something. A bunch of the gods at Olympus are a bunch of random people that you just recognize from assorted places. Like there's nothing immediately jarring or like, oh yeah, that guy, he's famous for whatever the fuck. It's just like not a lot. Like they're at least there's at least pedigree on display, and it does show in a lot of ways. And it's like I say that as if Laurence Olivier isn't playing Zeus in the original. He was great though, I should say.
Yeah, for when he was there,
he was there. Yes,
he was surprisingly in very little of the movie.
Yeah,
which is good for him. Apparently, he was sick the entire time. But yeah, apparently he was fairly ill. I wish I could remember who it was. It might have been Pat Roach, who was Hephaestus. I forget what the facts said, but
it was Pat Roach, who very brief scene.
Yeah, it might have been Pat Roach, but I can't remember. Who apparently he leaned up against one time, and he's like, "Let me borrow some of your strength."
Oh,
he was so sick.
My God, that's such a cool thing just to say.
I'd be scared.
It's like.
Especially if it was coming from like this extremely famous theater, I'd be like, "Oh my God!"
I mean, like
that's how he's so successful.
Yeah, exactly. Like even in that, he was going straight for the character, and everything. I was like, "Yeah, that's actually incredible." And I need to watch more stuff with Olivier. He's just a powerhouse of an actor.
Let's see if we can fit him in more of this show. We'd have to find some stuff that he's been in that would qualify.
Yeah,
but...
I mean, hell, if we can find a recording of a stage play, I'm sure there's something that's been made into a movie.
Yeah.
Which that counts.
That'd be interesting.
That technically counts. I mean, it's stretching it, but
So I don't know where you want to go from here, but I do have one last thing on my mind that I want to cover.
Yeah, go right ahead.
And that is Calabas.
Yes. Which I meant to bring it up earlier. In the 81 version, very cool makeup for whenever it's just him like from a shoulders up shot. Probably the best effects in the movie, personally.
He has very good. It's pretty good effects. Not like that Maggie Smith superimposed over a statue effect.
Yeah, that one was weird.
It actually looks good. I mean, it's just makeup, but then it's not too especially since most of his scenes are at night.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too jarring when it's the stop motion.
Yeah, because the thing they did was Calabas's character has like this big kind of like lizard-like tail behind him when he walks. And whenever he was on like full standing on screen, he was portrayed in a claymation model, so they could show the tail and everything. But then anytime it was a close-up shot, it was actually the actor in makeup doing it and everything. Which
Neil McCarthy.
Neil McCarthy, thank you. And so,
but he, to an extent, Zeus is the antagonist. Well, / Thetis. Thetis. They're both sort of the antagonists just for the fact that they're god figures that are, they're like playing chess with people.
Yeah.
But Calabas is really the antagonist of the film. And in the new one, I don't know why he's there.
Yeah,
there's no point. He just wastes time.
He really just he's there to kind of, not necessarily inciting action, but like kind of wrap up actions, where it has a lot of moments where, oh, we haven't had action for a little while, let's have him show up and inadvertently create the scorpions from his blood, and then only ever show up one more time at the near end when he kills Io, so we can have a like big dramatic death to really bring home the point of the stress of the situation. And it's just, and it's not even like even the character that they did, like he was it was so stupid how he was introduced. Like in the original one, like he kept the same name that he was like when he became a monster. Like his name was Calabos, and I can't remember for the life of me if he's from an actual myth or not. I'm pretty sure he is.
He's not.
Oh, he is.
I looked it up extensively, and he is a movie. He is a Harryhausen film original character.
Oh, there we go. But still, it's like even the way they portray him in the original is like, okay, that's at least believable. But it's really dumb how he's introduced in the new one, because it's like established that King Acrisius is cursed by Zeus for having attempted to kill his wife and son, and is turned into this monster. And the way we first see him, like, actually on screen is like when Hades comes to approach him to make him his agent, and he's like, he goes up to him, he's like, Calibos and King Acrisius, and he goes, "There is no Acrisius, there is only Calibos." It's like, what?
Which is really cool.
What? That's like, that is the most middle school poetry bullshit I have heard in a while. Not since, well, okay, not since it was in the Shell, actually. But it's still, it was ridiculous. I heard that, I was like, really? That's what we're doing here?
Well, here's where I'm confused, because in the original, his name is Calibos.
Yeah.
Because that's what his parents named him. That was his name. Okay. So, Acrisius is disfigured. Maybe he wants to go by a different... Why does he pick... Is there a reason he picks Calibos? No, he just, like, sort of says it. That's my name now.
No, there's no established reason why he has this name. He just says that because he, like, thinks it's a bit more appropriate for this monster, which is, like...
Yeah, King Acrisius thought maybe the fans of the original film should...
Right, exactly. That's like modern day. That'd be like if in modern day, if someone got, like, disfigured in an accident or something, and they took it really hard, and someone knocked on the door, it's like, "Jeff, you okay?" It's like, "There is no Jeff, there is only Brian." It's like, it's a totally normal name, is technically. It's like, that's so stupid.
Okay, I see you changed your name and you're doing the scene from Ghostbusters, which is fine, but I'm here to ask something of you.
It's like,
okay?
Your rent's due. Shut up. I don't care if your name's Matilda. I need rent money.
You're evicted. How about that?
So, yeah, like, that pretty much kind of just sums up the whole differences between the two. Like, the original one had, if not care, it didn't necessarily stick to exact myth, but even in the moments where it made stuff up, it, like, kind of tried to keep it steeped in the mythology. Like, you know, the Dionysus, or the two-headed dog, I can't remember its exact name now, but Dionysus, thank you. The Pegasus's presence, and, you know, the fact that there's just the one and everything, you know, Calibos being made up but having an appropriate name and then appropriate design and everything for the situation, versus the new one just kind of doing whatever the hell it wanted with the mythos, which, like, again, it seemed like it was doing with intention of expanding and saying, like, mythos being kind of more of a fluid thing, with it being with an entire planet filled with all these mythical creatures. Things tend to get kind of liquid. And then just doing all this kind of random stuff, like, you know, Acrisius is now Calibos for no discernible reason. There's a bunch of Pegasus still alive, but the one that Perseus rides is specifically a black one. Oh, it's so edgy. Which I saw that and I was just like, God fucking hell, that's so dumb.
Well, black is more manly.
Yeah,
so.
But it was like, there's this, I literally, like, stopped the movie at that point. It was like, man, it's a flying horse that you're flying in to defeat a giant monster. It looks badass no matter what color. White is fine. It's like, mother of God. And it's just, like, stuff like that where, you know, they kind of just doing the very base level of Hades' character and that sort of stuff. And it gives me such a weird relationship with both of these, because, like, on the one hand, I love Greek myth. On the other hand, the recent one is still, in a lot of ways, objectively better in certain ways. It's hard to really say which one I picked over the other.
It's better in a lot of its technique.
Yeah,
but
it's just, but it's just, like, it's so, like, inexcusably generic in a lot of ways. I'm just like, there are so many good movies that could have come from this kind of concept. And at the same time, I also would have to say, you know, both of these movies were technically billed as, like, you know, big summer blockbuster type movies. They weren't trying to reinvent the wheel or anything. But it's just like, neither, and, like, and the worst part of it all is, like, neither of these movies are great. Like, this is the first kind of case where we haven't had, like, one. It's either very one-sided or they're both kind of equally really good. Both of these have a lot of problems, and so that makes it even harder to actually pick, because I can't really recommend either of these to go out and see specifically. Maybe the original, if only for Harryhausen's work, but otherwise I'm just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if there's, because of like the Harryhausen effect and some of the love and some of the set designs, even with green screen, they still do look pretty good. There are a lot of flaws that I'm willing to forgive with the original, except for that Boobo the Owl thing.
Yeah, that one was dumb.
I'm not gonna forgive that damn thing, but everything else, like, I'm willing to forgive it. It's one of those things where I might actually watch, if it was on TV, if I actually watch TV, I might actually watch it again if I was like, okay, this is a tricky situation. Let's say both of these movies are playing on TV at the same time, just on different channels, and I'm with a person who hasn't seen either of them. I think I'd show them the 1981 one. Yeah. I think that we'd have more fun talking about it. Obviously, we'd have fun picking apart its flaws, but I think it was just more enjoyable for me. The genericness of the 2010 one just made it kind of a slog for me to watch.
Yeah, and like, but I guess the problem in the end is that in that same situation, I'd probably pick the 2010 version because like, at least then, it's at least fun with the action, and like if I'm just hanging out at someone's house, it'd be like, yeah, this is just kind of a dumb fun thing. It's like if I had a couple beers, it'd be fun to watch, but in the original one, I just kind of be like, this is just kind of janky feeling at the end of the day. And so
I think 2010 one might be fine. I might have it on if it was like in the background, but I definitely would not be watching it. That's like a do the dishes type of movie.
yeah, that's
I have a fair amount of those.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say either one's my favorite because that would imply that I really like one, but if I'm picking one, I guess it's the 81 version. Like, that's the term I have to use, is picking. I can't even say...
Yeah, it's like which one I would...
Preference.
Yeah, preference. Like, yeah, and I would have to pick the 2010 version. This is a really weird situation for these.
All right. It kind of is. Hopefully we'll have better luck next week, but...
Yeah.
That's going to be a whole different story. I'm going to talk to you about that after the show.
Yeah,
anyways.
Y'all don't get to know. It's a secret. But yeah, I guess
for now.
Yeah, that's just kind of how the episode ends. Not with a bang, but with a bit of a whimper. It's just like,
yeah,
both these movies.
Like, what do we do?
Like, both these movies kind of suck. It's like, it's like, props to Harryhausen for his work, and props to the visual effects in the 2010 version. But God, I wouldn't watch either of these. Like, if I had to, I would, but I wouldn't normally.
I mean, definitely. I'm sorry, everybody. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Twitter at It Remade. Gmail, They Remade It at gmail.com.
Yeah.
We're on Instagram. They Remade It at Instagram.
I didn't even know that.
That's about it.
Yeah, it's just this little, just kind of just slumping into the end here.
And there you have it. The end of the podcast. That gave way to such constellations as Jacob, Stuart, TheyRemadeIt.com.
And I'm trying to think of a thing for like the vein Cassiopeia, but I'm going to blank. and the ever evil train in the background of my apartment. It constantly ruins shots. Takes,
and
whatever.
The oft hated The Departed.
The ever inaccurate Ghost in the Shell. Well,
the just all around unfunny Ghostbusters 2016.
There's a lot of really crappy constellations.
I didn't make them or name them.
Oh man. Well, I guess on that note, I'm your disappointing myth Stuart.
I didn't know we were doing this. I'm your evil horned goat man, Jacob.
I'm just going off what you were saying.
Acrisius.
There is no Acrisius. Just Calibos.